All right. We are back for episode 3. It has not been a week.
Yeah. It's been 3 weeks since our last recording, which is, not great, not a great start when you're like, every week we're going to be coming in here and doing this, but it's for a good reason. The learning curve of this is not just learning to live, this is learning to podcast.
I think we need to start, and we'll get this out of our way early in our careers with our first public apology.
Right.
Because we've been editing episode 1, and honestly, it's one of the worst episodes of content I've ever seen or listened to. It is just terrible.
Yeah, it's frustrating to watch because when I go back and look at it, I'm like, I don't like how I sound. I don't like what I'm saying. I'm not coming across the way I want to, and it's like it's so annoying to see that. And just be like, I have to put this out here because we've committed to this is where it's episode 1. So we're kind of coming back on episode 3, be like, okay, let's maybe reiterate some points and come across the right way this time. Now that we've had time to watch ourselves fumble about in the most dry, boring way known to man.
The thing that was really, I think, frustrating to watch was I just started questioning, does everyone in my life hate me? Because if I'm talking like this all the time, just boring, monotone, 10 seconds between each word, it's like, man, who's talking to me?
Right.
And how?
Yeah. I don't know how people put up with it.
Yeah. But it's good. We've learned, I think, like you said, we're learning to podcast. The editing has been a mountain of work. We don't know what we're doing, but we're starting to figure it out. So hopefully we're getting in the swing of things with the weekly uploads like the plan still is. Episode 2, we still have to work through. We're still working on episode 1, but we're starting to make some quicker progress.
It's definitely taking longer to edit because it sucks.
It's terrible. I mean, it's like, think about editing something where really you're not looking what small mistakes to cut out. You're looking, where can I find something usable?
Right.
So we're sorry.
Now, if you haven't watched it,
very few people probably in this world
if you have
watched it.
Thanks, I guess, but it's also
don't. And if you haven't, don't.
Yeah.
Don't. Episode 2, we've got hopes for. We haven't really looked at it yet.
It sounds like it's going to be a little better. So maybe that's worth checking out. There's some at least interesting information in there. We'll edit it in a way that it should hopefully be entertaining.
And we're going to hopefully recap just a little bit of the information that we did touch on in episode 1 and episode 2 so that this episode kind of catches us up to speed so you never have to go watch those episodes.
I think we could catch up on episode 1 within about 5 minutes of talking here. As far as we mainly went over who we are, why we're here, what this is about, and what we're doing. So we don't need to go over all of those things. No. But there is definitely some value to touch on the purpose in a way that makes a little more concise sense.
Yeah, so to get into more of what this really is, because we talked a lot about this in episode 1, but we want to recap and kind of re-emphasize what matters. I think we want this podcast to be about finding meaning, less so than maybe the optimizing and the biohacking that it might have come across as.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we definitely had our struggles that we talked about, and it's our struggles with finding purpose. And I've had plenty of times throughout high school, college, where it's just been days and weeks of just rotting on the internet or doing something where I felt like, man, this cannot be it. This is not what I'm here to do. And then that's just one category, one box of fulfillment. Then there's the whole other one of when I look towards the future and what I want, my impact and what I want to spend my life doing. It's like the options that I see in my career path, and I'm getting my degree in computer engineering. And when I look at the options and I'm like, man, is this really what I want to do? And if I do, how can I find purpose and meaning in the everyday? Or do I need to radically change what I do to be something different? So there's a lot of these questions that I know I've had. We've talked about it, and you've felt similarly. So how do we go about finding the questions or the answers to these questions?
Yeah, and I think on that note, when we look at our own lives and the struggle with meaning that you've talked about, but also the more research we've done, we feel like there's a bit of a global direction that we're a bit scared about. I think about the relationships I'm in, my family, my friends, just the world that we're headed in. And we've done some research in this first challenge that we're going to get into later this episode about phone usage and just how technology is really playing a negative role in our lives. And so this podcast is about, we want to learn how to find meaning in a world that feels like it's diverging from that being the goal for humanity. And so hopefully we can help others do that too and build a community that wants to do that. But we want it to be a holistic approach, not just about getting the right sleep or getting the right diet. That's part of it because health is a big role in how we feel on a day-to-day basis. So we will talk about topics that aren't as holistic sounding and that might be a little more optimizy, but really we want to understand more about meaning as a whole.
Yeah. The approach is going to be about environmental setup. We're not going to sit down here and be like, we're going to learn how to get the most willpower and we're going to learn how to really just grind it out. That's not what this is about. This is about environmental. How do we change our environments? How do we change how we interact with the world to just make us better? And that's, again, not going to be something that's very meaning inducing per se, but maybe more steers us in that direction of where our bodies and minds are just reaching these levels at which we can interact with these higher level emotions such as fulfillment easier.
Yeah, and I think the distinction of it not just being a self-help podcast and being about environmental design is really important to the meaning of this podcast because there's a lot of value in the self-help and the optimizing, and there's been a big push on the internet for you to like become the best version of yourself. But in some ways, I think we both feel that downplays the issue of where we're at on a societal level, because really when you look around, there are huge flaws in the environment with the food that's designed to keep us addicted, the phones that are designed to keep us addicted. And so environmental design is crucial. Before we started this phone challenge and purged our phones of all the social media, there was an Instagram reel that I saw. I can't attribute it to the right person because I don't remember who posted it. Like most reels,
right?
I have no idea. But he said something. He said, I'm sick of like the 75 hard challenges. I want to do infinite medium. He's like, I'm going to work hard and exercise, but on a day I feel tired, maybe a light walk is good. Or I'm going to eat well most of the time, but if I go out with friends, I'm going to eat something bad or I'm going to drink a little and it's going to be fine. And I want to do it in a sustainable way. And I remember going to the comments and it was just filled with people being like, yes, like resonating with this message. And I was thinking about it because on the one hand, I was like, I resonate with that too. And then on the other hand, I see somebody who's like really grinding and I'm like, oh, that's cool too. But I think what happens with the grind mindset, what happens with this all or nothing approach is when it becomes binary of either perfection or failure, you just fail.
Yeah.
Because you break at some point.
So yeah, I've heard people talk about how the human brain is only capable of 2 new changes at a time that last for a couple of weeks and then you're able to take on more. And we did a challenge a couple of months ago where we spent 30 days. Really, we changed a whole lot of things. We changed diet, sleep, workout routine, and we were very strict. And that was fun. We learned a lot and we made a lot of improvement, but then it just fell apart afterwards. And it slowly just devolved until we eventually were like, okay, we need to get back to being productive and doing things again. And we chose instead to find that happy medium where we are more tolerant of having schedule changes and we're more flexible, but it's worked out much better. And it's continuing to get better.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly my point. And that's exactly what all these people were resonating with, which is it can be too much to try and get it all right all the time. But it's also, we do want to make positive change in our life. And there is room for the person who really wants to full send it. But a lot of times, if that's the bar that equals success, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, there seems to be this kind of universal idea that you do what you're capable, like your motivation level has to match the activity. And there's ways to change the activity to be easier, to be harder. And then whenever you can find the balance of where it's just easy enough that you know that you can do it and have that mental kind of forgiveness for whenever it's on a day where you just are lacking that motivation, but then being able to come back and do it the next day. That's kind of where the changes comes from. And that's one thing that this podcast is going to be really cool is as we learn and as we develop over this year, or over the whole future. I don't know how long this is going to go on for, but it's going to be really fun to see as our hopefully consistency and these things improve, seeing proof of the medium.
Yeah. And I heard, and I'm sure I heard this on a podcast, but it was like, if you have a habit and you skip it for a day, that's a rest day. If you skip it for the 2 days, that's the beginning of a new habit. Consistency breeds just wins stack. But how do you actually get a consistent habit? You make it something you can do every day. Because when it's too hard, when it's too demanding, it'll break, and then you won't be consistent. And a small amount of consistency goes so much further. We've definitely both experienced this. Goes so much further than trying your absolute hardest and having 1 week of perfection and then just going back to what you were. And so this podcast is about sustainable growth. It's not just going to be about optimizing, and it's going to be about deeper topics. And I know this is another question that we really wanted to answer on this podcast, but what are the topics that we're going to get into, and how are we actually going to pick them so that we have maybe more of a holistic approach to this thing than the self-help world has in the past?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of the topics so far that we've decided to go with and kind of road mapped out are ones that we feel are having the biggest impact on us now. When I do think of this podcast and I think of how we're talking about fulfillment, and then to come in and have topics that aren't directly fulfillment related seems a little weird, but it's almost we're starting with our phones, and we talked about that last episode. We're going to briefly recap kind of how it's been going, but those were things that we really saw that were detracting from our lives. And so just cutting that out. And then it's going to be picking other things where it's like, okay, we're lacking energy, so let's go for sleep or go for diet or both. And then
almost building the fundamentals of our life so that we have the capacity to go at some of the bigger questions. And so that's, I think, where we felt it was coming across as just optimizing health, but it's a fundamentals thing so that we can almost put into place some building blocks that will allow us to be more sustainable in this effort, and then give some just practical advice on those things because they are very important to just how you feel on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And one cool thing about this is that we haven't got it figured out yet. When you see someone who's got it all figured out and they're like, oh yeah, you just have to do this works, it's almost harder to believe them because you're like, there's no way. Whereas people who can hopefully watch this podcast, if they resonate with some struggle that we're struggling with, and they see us after 30 days, we're like, wow, this really started to feel better. Or after a month, 2 months, and then they're able to take that and apply that to their own lives, because there'll hopefully be a lot more belief and trust with what we say and what we do.
Yeah.
And we also want to sprinkle in some of the bigger ideas as we go.
Yeah.
But a lot of research is going to be done on, how can we set ourselves up for success physically, and then how can we take those good vibes and apply all the mental stuff onto it as well.
And some of the mental stuff we do want to explore is topics like Buddhism or meditation. We want to look into frameworks for life like Stoicism. We want to look into like different morality viewpoints from religions or spirituality. There's a list of things that we're going to dive into that we're really excited. But hopefully if any of those things kind of resonate as like, oh, I want to know what implementing that in my life would do, hopefully this is the journey to watch. Mm-hmm. And as you've touched on, we're starting with getting rid of the phones. And that's what we've been doing for the past 3 weeks, is we've pretty much reduced our phones to nothing.
Right. All right. So we touched on the kind of why we're doing this in episode 2, but to give a brief recap, it seems to be that most of the research we did, just all fingers point to phones just being the worst. There's obviously helpful apps. Most of them suck.
They're terrible.
They're terrible.
Yeah. And they're designed, we heard this recently on a podcast that we're going to talk about later in this episode, but it's like they're designed like slot machines, some of them. They're designed to be maximally addictive, and they know it, and it's intentional, and it works.
Yeah. And we're going to show our screen time here shortly, but we're not coming from a place of, everyone else is really struggling with those phones out there. We've been those people who spend a lot of time on our phones. I used to play mobile games all the time, and then it transitioned into Instagram Reels, doom scrolling, brain rotting, feeling like garbage all the time. And we did talk about that, so I don't want to waste too much time. If you want to, hopefully episode 2 is watchable. We'll see.
Maybe episode 4 we'll come back and say, don't watch episode 2. Don't watch episode 3. We're starting again.
Yeah. But ideally you can go back and check that out.
Yeah.
So let's get into some results of how the 3 weeks of no, as in minimal phone usage has gone.
Yeah. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, hopefully if you're watching right now, and we'll go over the numbers so that if you're just listening, you can hear, but hopefully our screen time is on the screen right now.
Something like right here.
Now, and maybe I'll do another hand, just, I don't know where we're putting it, but some of the hard numbers, and we can go back and forth. I did this on a weekly basis because we started 3 weeks ago, or we started 2 weeks ago. And this was, I think I was coming off of a week of about 4 hours a day. I didn't actually write that down, but that was 4 hours a day on my phone. I was spending a lot of time doing other entertainment on my computer as well. Mm-hmm. So 2 weeks ago when we started, I averaged 57 minutes, 6 hours and 42 minutes total for the week. And then that's 57 minutes a day, but we said only essential. And if you see, hopefully it's on the screen, Maps was 1 hour and 37 minutes. Messages 1 hour 20. Macro Factor, I'm tracking my macros currently for some of the dieting that we're challenging ourselves with. So that was 57 minutes. Or Whoop for 25 minutes, and just random Safari for 16 minutes. So pretty much no non-essential use. Mm-hmm. And that was the first week.
Yeah, my first week was 27 minutes average. And 36 minutes of that was Whoop, 36 was on messages, and then 20 minutes was music.
Well, okay, and here's my only gripe is that on my commute to work, when I have Maps on CarPlay, it still counts as screen time, which just feels so unfair.
Yeah, there's definitely, my screen time for this current past week is so scuffed because I guess it doesn't even have it doesn't even say what it is, but here. This little box.
Oh, you're giving us a nightmare. This little box, we're never getting that in.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just blank, and it counts towards screen time.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about.
I think that's probably just like when you're on the phone, but not on any app. Like between
because I was on a call, so maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. So the week after, we don't need to get into the details because it'll be on here, but my next week was 52 minutes average. And the week after that was 1 hour 17 minutes average. But again, that 5 hours, 35 minutes total on the week, 2 hours and 18 minutes was just Maps. I'm not even looking at the screen. Macro Factors, Safari, Messages, Whoop. Pretty much nothing. A little bit of Spotify here and there.
Yeah, my next week was 45 minutes average, but it was kind of also scuffed because 1 hour and a half of that was on music when I was driving. So I guess the phone was accidentally left on.
Yeah.
And then this past week it's been 1 hour, but I've been on a lot more phone calls, and so there's just all these blank things on there.
You gotta stop doing that, dude. We're gonna hate you post edit.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I think
mostly Whoop and Messages, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
So not bad.
Not bad.
And this is also, I haven't watched any entertainment on YouTube. I did watch, let's see, we watched the Super Bowl that happened.
We watched the
and
Super
I went
Bowl.
and I saw Wuthering Heights in theaters.
And I think on Valentine's Day weekend, I watched 2 episodes of the show.
Yeah. So,
and that was it. And so, first of all, we did good. We did what we said we would. Now, the important part is like, how did it actually go? How did it feel? Because we mentioned this in the previous episode. We've tried this a little before, so it's not our first time cutting out technology. But it wasn't easy the whole time for me. And so maybe we can go in a little week by week, or just some of the main things you noticed. Maybe start with the challenges of when we actually first got off. Obviously, we're riding this high of motivation. We're doing it for a podcast, so we have that in our advantage because it's something we're actively choosing to do. But that wears off after a few days.
Right. Yeah. So to start, we did do this back in November, and when we did it, it was a lot different because we weren't doing all this podcast. We didn't have a lot of work to do. Now we're busy all the time, but before, I remember getting off the phone. I was like, I didn't know what to do. I would just sit and I literally would look at the wall, and I was just like, because I had no motivation to do anything. And that was the first thing that I really noticed was without the phone, I didn't want to do anything else. I just wanted to be on my phone. And when I'm like, I can't do that, I just didn't want to do anything else. I would just sit there. I'm like, this is what this challenge is for. It was pretty enlightening to be like, wow, I have no motivation. And then that slowly started to build up, and I started reading a lot, and I would read for 3+ hours at a time, just in and amongst my schoolwork. But then this time I've been a lot more busy. So I really haven't had a lot of those times where I've just kind of been bored and just looking at walls. But there was one day, and then I discovered the window. Dude.
Transformation.
There's so much to see out there.
Of looking.
Yeah, there's so much to see out there. It's like a whole world, huh?
Yeah.
And then I started walking. I've been walking outside now. It's crazy.
Wow.
But this is one of those things. It's like I didn't even realize. You could look up and there's. But yeah, so getting into the struggle, the first couple of days were definitely I wanted to reach for it. It was hard not like I would, but then I'd be like, no. And then when I was tired, that especially was hard. After getting bad sleep, because I just can't sleep these days, it seems. But anytime after like a workout or a run or just waking up in the morning, I feel tired. It's so tempting to, because we don't look at our phones in the morning. That's like one of the parts of the challenges. We don't look at it first thing. We wait until well after we're done with our morning gym session. So it's been tempting, but that's probably the main downside that I've experienced. I would say otherwise, that kind of boredom, no motivation has been not as apparent this go around. I definitely feel like I've been more motivated to go do things a lot quicker. And I think I was more off of my phone kind of before this challenge, more so than you were. So I think I might have had a little head start, because when we did do this in November, we deleted all the apps and everything. I just didn't re-download most of them. So my screen time's been significantly lower over the last couple of months than typically in life.
Yeah, I think the first time we did this challenge for me was easier. It was like I couldn't give my attention to the challenge almost because we were so busy. And almost, I think, like you said, my tank was just lower throughout the days for a lot of days. So I had less energy. And that's when the real like compulsion to check really happens. I mean, we work out in the mornings pretty early, and then I go into work, and it's like that first hour of work, it's like I'm tired. I'm like almost like I have a bit of an energy crash after the gym and after breakfast. And so it's like really struggling to not get on my phone. And I didn't, and I'm happy I didn't. But those first couple weeks, there was a lot of moments where I was like, man, I would love to just check out right now. And so that, I mean, it's to be expected that your brain takes some time to adjust. We talk, we listen to this podcast, this Diary of a CEO podcast that we're going to really get into. We'll touch on some of the brief points because we learned a lot of interesting things. And they talk about how it takes 8 weeks for your brain to change. And we're 3 weeks in. And I definitely feel like now I'm starting to see some shifts in focus where I feel like I can sustain focus for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And that's really nice to see, but I was not feeling that for week 1 or week 2. And so then it's like my focus was poor. I want to reach for my phone, but I'm not. I found myself sometimes picking up my phone and just without thinking, picking up my phone and be like, well, there's nothing to check on this. I'm not supposed to be on it, and just putting it down. But it was still a disruptor. And it was like disrupting my thoughts even when I wasn't using it. And so I think that shows just how ingrained of a behavior it was. And it's making me grateful that I'm cutting that out. But also the other downside, the other struggle is at work, I'm on my computer all day. And then for the work that we're doing here, a lot of it is online as we prepare for a podcast. And so there's still a lot of technology use, and it's essential for what we're trying to get done, but it still is like I'm looking at a screen a lot. So I think hopefully going forward, we can maybe make some changes to that as well.
Yeah. It feels like we're not getting all the benefits because it's just looking at a laptop for most of the day. And that's the phone. The content of the phone is definitely a more extreme version of that, which is getting rid of that is what's been very helpful. But even just being on a laptop's not great. So I would love to find some way. But you did touch on, you're saying you feel more focused. What are some other, have you noticed any other benefits, or is it mostly just a focus?
Well, one surprising benefit is I actually think my background stress is decreased, because when you're on social media a lot, part of my feed is like political updates or the news, and it's not good.
No, it is a bad time to be around.
But it's also, yeah, right. It's really depressing, honestly, and it's also, on that note, it's just like something that feels like the end of the world doesn't last the news cycle for a week or a day even. And so every time you check your phone, it's like, wow, this crazy thing is happening. But then if you're not on your phone, you don't hear about it, and no one's even talking about it a week later. Like, if there was something really important to know, and I'm not saying it's bad to be informed, but the things that are really important, I'm still learning about. I still talk with my friends and my family, and I get updates on the news, and sometimes I'll do a quick search on my computer, but I'm not getting inundated with it when I don't want it or I don't need it. And so that stress has been kind of wiped out, which has been actually a really nice benefit. Mm-hmm. What about you? What are the life-changing moments of the week?
Yeah, well, for one, I also feel focus increase, and I feel like I have more capacity throughout the day, because instead of going on my phone to take a break or to just check out, instead I usually will just go on a walk, or maybe just listen to some music, or just kind of sit even for a couple minutes. And that feels very helpful to then getting back into things. Like even this morning, after the gym, I was feeling really tired. I was like, man, I don't want to go and do like my classwork today. This would have been a very typical time in the past where I've hopped on Instagram Reels and checked out, and it probably would have wasted so many hours, and then I would be even less motivated to do it. But instead I just sat and I just kind of thought for like 5 minutes, and I was just kind of like, let me just chill out and relax. And then it literally was like 5 minutes later, I was like, yeah, I'm good to go.
Yeah, the rebound, I mean, that's a huge point. The rebound into activity is drastically different, because the phone, we treat it as a break, but it makes you not want to get back into the activity. We talked about this before. It really drains your motivation, and it makes whatever task that's hard harder, more boring, less rewarding, and it cuts your attention and your cognition and all these things that the rebound activity that you want to get into is way worse. And so getting off of it, this challenge isn't about being maximally productive. It's about not being on the phone, which means there's times where it's like, man, I don't want to do something. I am just going to sit here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then 15 minutes later, I'm doing something, whereas opposed to 2 hours later, I got to put my phone down.
Right. It's kind of this backwards way of thinking where if I want to be productive, I just need to do nothing for maybe 10 minutes, and then I'll be so much more productive afterwards that it's like, wow, I would not have actually gotten that done. So yeah, this challenge has not been about doing something. It's been about not doing something. And as a byproduct, it's felt like I've been doing so much more than I would have if our challenge was, let's just go and be productive instead of let's cut out the bad behavior.
Yeah. And one thing I would say to people who feel a little scared to get off the phone because of the FOMO of missing out on the DM from your friend or the Snapchat or whatever it is, or seeing the update from your favorite content creator. I felt that too at first. And then I realized when you're off of it, you just don't miss it as much as you think you would. Mm-hmm. Like there's the compulsion to get on it, but you don't, at least I've experienced this, feel like you're missing things. Because when you're doing other things, you feel like, oh, I'd make this trade every day of the week because what I'm missing is less valuable than what I'm getting.
Yeah.
For those who are maybe thinking about, they're on the fence about, should I cut off my phone? Take a week. Take 30 days if you can. Get off the apps and just see, do you miss it? Because if that's your concern, I think you probably won't.
Yeah. No. And it honestly, I don't feel like I'm missing out. I feel like everyone else is missing out.
Yeah.
Because when I was just walking through campus today, and I was walking through this building, and there's all these benches, and everyone's sitting there, and every single person was on their phone. And I was like looking around. I was like, I wouldn't even have noticed these people were here because I probably would have been on my phone. And it's crazy. I'm like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
And this is what it has been for so long. And you go on a bus and everyone's on their phones. You go into class, everyone's on their phones and I'm like, yeah, I was there. And now that I'm getting off, I'm like, man, there's so many things to do. I feel so much more excited and wanting to do things. I'm like, man, how are people not doing this right now?
Yeah. And I think this gets a little bit into some of the added research we've done in between. And there's two things we want to talk about. And I've mentioned it a few times. We listened to this podcast called I'll tell you what it's called, but if you're listening to this podcast, then surely you know about The Diary of a CEO, which is a massive podcast. He had two guests on. One was a Harvard doctor who specialized and did a lot of work looking at the effects of phone usage. And another one wrote the book called The Anxious Generation, which was, I haven't read it, but apparently really revolutionizing in how we think about a lot of these things. And from a research standpoint, from a societal level, a big focus was on how we've seen just spikes in anxiety and depression, and our attention spans are more eroded than ever. Our cognition is more eroded than ever. And it's also created like this loneliness epidemic because we're not connecting with people in healthy ways. And when we are connecting via social media, which is kind of this benefit that's sold to us of it's more connecting, you're not doing it in a meaningful, a deep way, or you're really in this comparison economy where you're just seeing the best version of other people and you're feeling worse about yourself. And so, you talk about going through campus and seeing everybody on their phones. And part of the reason we're really interested in this podcast is we're kind of scared about the path that we were heading down, the path a lot of our friends are heading down, not from a judgment standpoint, but from like, these things are designed to hurt us.
Yeah, it's just the way that things are going. And it's just getting better and better and better at it. Like if we start trying now our hardest to make sure that we don't get addicted to these things, like I hope we can make it because they're just going to come at us harder and harder and harder. It's going to be so tempting because it will be like just the lowest hanging fruit you can get to just feel the maximum pleasure, and it's just going to eventually just ruin your life.
Yeah, and the things that are coming down the road, which are very scary, is, this podcast talked a lot about some things we can expect from AI and the use of chatbots and AI for companionship. And kind of to sum up this kind of scary and just terrible point, which is, these tech companies created this loneliness problem through all this social media and getting us out of social connection. And now they're bringing along chatbots to solve this loneliness problem, but it's actually just going to make the problem so much worse. And the big point was people are already using AI. The majority of use is already for therapy and companionship.
It almost seems like with all the short form content and all this stuff that just fries your attention span, it almost seems like, coming over to the large language model, it's like, these, there's no flashy lights, it's just a conversation with some very well read bot. But what it's really doing is it's accelerating the problem.
Yeah.
And it's isolating people even more. And it's also one of those things that's designed to keep you there.
They use this term on the podcast, which we're referencing a lot because we also looked into some of the research articles that they talked about. They use this concept, this echo chamber of one, where you think you're talking to this unbiased chatbot that has your best intentions, but it's really just trying to get you to keep interacting with it. It's going to affirm you in ways. It's going to tell you what you want to hear. Yeah. And it just spirals in such a negative way. And when we think about the effects this could have on our relationships and how much time we're spending out in the real world, I mean, it's already being minimized by our phones. This is just going to an order of magnitude worse.
Yeah.
And so, we're trying to think about this not from a willpower perspective, but an environmental design. So going back to the challenge, I wonder if there's any takeaways that you've had throughout these couple weeks that might be more about, or less about just put down your phone and more about some ways you can ground this behavior or change the environment that you're in so that it just becomes easier to do.
For me, the biggest things was literally just deleting the apps. And once I deleted them, I didn't really feel the urge to get back on them. Now, there's going to be other pressures that might entice you back into them. So as far as an actual environmental change, I'd say restricting, where you bring your phone, how often you have it out.
On that note, from an environmental standpoint, I would say for me, this concept of brain drain, which is the phone is just in your vicinity, your mind is going to go to it. It's going to like ping to it more often because it's just seeing it. Even if it's face down, it's like, oh, it's right there. I could grab it. And I was experiencing that a lot. So the advice I would give to somebody is put it out of sight. And it doesn't have to be, it's going to be on you throughout the day. But if you're going to sit down and do something, put it out of sight, out of reach. And not, you might think like, oh, that's a small change. But literally having it out of sight versus sitting on the table, even if your intention for both is to not pick it up, one is going to be way easier for your brain to resist that compulsion.
Yeah. I also did recently grayscale and made my background black and like deleted all the things off my home screen. That's except for like messages and the phone app pretty much. So those are other little tweaks, just making it as unappealing as possible, basically. And it really does get easier. All right. So one of the bigger things that we've been tackling with this phone challenge is kind of fragmented attention and the ability to focus. So to companion this, we've read the book Deep Work, which is kind of about focus.
Yeah, it's pretty much completely about focus. It was a book written in 2016, and this was actually before all the short form content really came.
Yeah, Vine was probably around, but no one saw Vine as like the devil, whereas nowadays it's like Reels, TikTok, LinkedIn Shorts, or whatever they have.
It's bad when you're watching LinkedIn.
Has shorts.
I deleted LinkedIn, man. It's like it's seriously like
they pull you into
they pull you in because it's whatever. We don't need to get into LinkedIn short form content, but this came out before that, and so I'd argue that what we've learned from this is more valuable today than it was when it was even written. But like you said, we wanted to learn. We wanted to bring more learning to the podcast, so we read this entire book. So our attention span was at least good enough to do that. But the concept of deep work, and I think you have the definition written down. Maybe we can give that as the concise.
Yeah. So the definition given of deep work is professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate.
Yeah. And so deep work, it touches on a lot of things. The focus is focus, but a lot of it is about creating more value and gaining almost a competitive advantage because so many people struggle with focus and it's not encouraged in the workplace based on how a lot of businesses are set up. It's not encouraged in our social life based on having a phone on us all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's not a skill that's cultivated. And that is the key distinction. It's a skill. It's not just something you do, it's something you get better at.
It also seems to have a pretty big impact on just your brain and how you kind of approach life, which I liked. It does almost tie into that kind of fulfillment aspect of how do you apply yourself so fully and focus. And there's a quote in there that I don't really remember, but it's basically talking about your life is basically what you pay attention to.
I've got it written down.
All right, let's hear it.
Page 77 for those who are following at home. Who you are, what you think, feel, and do is the sum of what you focus on.
Yeah. And so that idea of being able to hone and control your focus and attention to basically just become the person that you want to be is a skill that you need to get better at. And we're getting better, but for the majority of what social media and short form content and everything is just destroying the skill and just eroding your ability to basically be who you want to be and to focus on the things you want to focus on.
Yeah, and on that lens, and why we talked about the Diary of a CEO podcast and why we would recommend listening to that podcast is because when we listened to it, it was even more of a wake up of, man, this is really having such a negative consequence. And this book really pairs with that nicely because it's, that podcast talks about the negative effects of our phone. And this is almost the mirror, like the other side of it, the positive effects of when you can get rid of that and you can really engross yourself in focused work, how much you can get done, how much like you said, of a more fulfilling experience you can have. And it's a really compelling argument for like sinking into what you do and growing that attention span and building the skill of sustained focus.
Yeah. It is more kind of a business oriented book, but it does bleed into a lot of categories that we're interested in. I mean, we are interested in business as we are doing this podcast.
I think, most people listening to this, are probably in a career, or maybe they're in school thinking about a career, and part of success from the traditional monetary standpoint, which is important for a lot of people, it's important for us, is somehow distinguishing yourself against your competitors, whether that's people you're trying to get a job over or whatever. And a big takeaway is deep work is the economic advantage, because it's a skill that most people don't have, but it's an approach that you can take to whatever you're doing. You can learn things quicker, you can do things better, and you can really produce much more output over the long run.
Yeah, and this is probably way more relevant now than it ever has been. One thing that he has in this book is this equation that is high quality work equals time spent times the intensity of focus. And I think it's a nice equation, but this equation to me is missing that kind of like the scalar factor of what you're actually focusing on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, because, as we said earlier, the book claims that you are what you focus on, and you can intensely focus on the wrong thing. Now, I think what he's getting at is almost this assumption that you're choosing something that's going to advance your career or a skill. And so it's like, regardless of what you're doing, you want to get the most out of that.
Yeah.
You need to do it for an extended period of time, and you need to do it intensely.
Yeah.
And another topic that he touches on that I do like is, he says, strategy is easy, execution is difficult. And I don't know if that was word for word, but the idea is like, and I feel like we've run into this a lot.
This has been the last several years.
That's been the theme, is the planning phase, and this is true for habit building. This is true for so many people. It's true really for us. The planning phase is fun. It's easy.
But can you get the plans out of the group chat?
Do it. And the deep work is, if you sit down and you don't just work for 30 minutes and scroll on your phone, you focus intensely on what you're doing, and you're not planning anymore. Like, get out of the planning phase and get to the work. You'll notice so much progress so quickly.
So then he goes on, after kind of clarifying why deep work is important and kind of why everyone should care. He goes on to get into his rules of how to do deep work. And unsurprisingly, the first rule is to work deeply.
And boy, had I not thought of that. I mean,
thank goodness he spelled that one out. But he mainly talks about the different ways to work deeply. And this is where I personally felt like I was getting a little thrown off the trail.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of his deep work philosophies.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so the first one is the monastic, where it's basically like you go isolate yourself forever, and that's all you do is deep work, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the unrealistic but rare case. The second one was bimodal, which is where you kind of go on periods of deep work, so maybe like a retreat, and you like grind, and then you come back to reality and kind of take care of your affairs and whatever. Then you go back, and then you and I'm cool with that. I feel like that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
The third one was rhythmic, which kind of gets on the point of what we were talking about earlier, where you start with doing a little thing every day, and then it slowly builds. So I don't really know how this fits into the deep work philosophy, because he talks about someone who had met Seinfeld and talked, and he said his advice was you have to get better at writing jokes, and how you do that is, write one every day, and then eventually you start writing more, and eventually you have this whole chain and this streak that you've got going. And I mean, this is like what Duolingo's built off of, basically, is doing these little things, and eventually it snowballs. I don't really see how that's. I get how it can snowball into deep work, but it seems like it snowballs into.
I see what you're saying, and I definitely experienced this as well. Some of it stretched the meaning, and the issue that I think he ran into was that the question arises, like, this person doesn't seem to be doing deep work, and they seem to be doing fine. And so he almost tried to tell you why it was still deep work.
Right.
When I think it would have been a stronger argument to say there are other ways to do this, but this is a very reliable way to be successful, and you should give it a try and see if it works for you, as opposed to trying to make the definition fit any success method.
Yeah, he did have a section in the beginning that was kind of saying how, like, being like, yes, obviously CEOs and other people, he's like, they don't do deep work because that's not what their job requires, but it typically took some amount to get there.
Right.
But his last philosophy, this is the journalistic approach, where you just kind of do it for like 20 minutes, whatever. And this is the one where I was kind of like, I don't see how he's like, he gave this example. This guy is like this journalist who, would just be hanging out with friends, and he like go upstairs and type for 20 minutes and come back. He's like, that's deep work. Right.
And to play devil's advocate here, I think what I recall from that section was him saying he could sink into deep work very quickly. Like, it was almost like when the wind blew, when the passion came, the creative thought happened, he could do undistracted work for as long as it took, and then just go back into his normal life.
Yeah.
But what that breaks, which is another part that he talks about, which I really like, is this idea of ritualizing the deep work, which is turn deep work into something that is a sacred part of your day. Like, if you're going to dial in, get the coffee that you like to drink, go into the room that's isolated, get out your nice journal, and like sink into the work and be like, take on the identity of being a deep worker. And I've had success with that.
Oh yeah.
And that goes against this journalistic idea of just like, do it whenever. And again, this was almost like you can make an argument that it's deep work. Who are we to tell the author who wrote it that it's not? But it's like,
to me, when he defines deep work in the beginning, it seems more of like the ability to sustain focus for like 3+ hours. That's what I interpreted deep work as, and sometimes even longer.
Yeah,
'cause it's kind of this, and that's where you really get to some of the benefits is after a long time. And I don't remember where I read this, but it was something that focus, to get into a deep state of focus, it actually takes like 30 to 45 minutes to like get into the zone. Now, I don't remember exactly where I read that, so that might just be wrong.
It could just be a lie. But what I will say is I have read, and this goes back to the phones, is attention residue, which is if you're constantly breaking your attention span, to get back in is harder. And when you take a break with your phone, you build up this attention residue. So it's like you're studying and you take a 10-minute break with your phone. Well, the next 20 minutes of studying, it's going to be harder to actually get into the zone again.
Yeah.
So I think that goes to what you're saying. And like you said, deep work, it's like it's sustained. So if you're just dropping into it, it doesn't feel like you're really going to be there.
It just seems like you're just focusing. It doesn't seem like deep work. But anyways, I do love the ritual. I definitely have found kind of my flow with the work. I like to go into the lab and put on my blue light glasses, and the hood goes up and the earbuds go in. It's like same playlist comes on. It's like time to just dial in. And it really does wondrous things.
And what I will say, going back to the fulfillment aspect, because we want that to be a big focus, when I'm doing anything, even if it's a thing I don't necessarily want to be doing, but I do it in a really intense, focused way, and you get into that flow state a little bit more, A, the time flies by. B, you do feel better about it. Like, you do feel there's a sense of enjoyment that I get out of it. And so for those who are, maybe doing a job that isn't the most thrilling job in the world, I think there's a level of fulfillment. He makes this argument that it's not about what you do, it's the way you do it that is going to bring you fulfillment. I don't know if that's 100% true for a lot of people, but it definitely strikes a chord for me that when I do something in a really focused way and I come out and I come up for air after 2 hours, 3-4 hours of really hard focus, I feel really good.
Yeah. I've noticed a similar thing. When it comes to the meaning and the kind of purpose aspect, listening to the Diary of the CEO podcast, they do just briefly talk about meaning. And part of it is kind of the daily enjoyment of what you do, but then part of it's this kind of deeper level of, am I making the impact that I want to do? Is this work really what I want to do? So when I sit there and I work and I like getting in the zone. It's fun. It's fun to solve problems and to just really dial in. But I don't end that just necessarily being like, man, today I was so like dialed in, that makes me so happy. It's more of like, yeah, that was fun and like I could do it. And I could see myself doing it for most of my life. But I have to imagine that there's some level at which I can have that feeling and be like, man, I was so dialed into doing the best thing that I could be doing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's not the cure for meaning.
No.
Because
I think it's almost it's almost not a distraction from it, but it's almost a way to just kind of turn the blinders on and your life just goes by.
But, I will say, to push back on that, a lot of people, the work they do, there's parts of me that feel this way sometimes. I know people who really resonate with this. It's like, my meaning doesn't necessarily have to come from my career. It's like I can raise a family, or I can spend time traveling when I get extra time, or I can pursue this side hobby that I'm interested in. And I don't have to derive all my meaning from my career. And I think that's a really healthy mindset for a lot of people who they're like, you know what, if I can clock in and I can get what I need to support my lifestyle and get meaning from other places, that's good. And so for those people, if you do want to maybe increase the enjoyment you're getting out of your job so you're not miserable at your job, I think this is really valuable. Because does it solve the meaning crisis for somebody who's sitting at work and saying to themselves, I hate this and I want to be doing something more important with my life? No, probably not. But for the person who's like, I'm okay if my job is my job and my meaning is elsewhere, well, doing deep work might let you succeed in your job more, and it might give you a deeper sense of meaning so that you enjoy it more. And so from that purpose, I do think it can be, maybe blinders on, but for those who they're not really looking for that from their work anyway, it could be really good.
Yeah, there's definitely a distinction. There are people who, it's just what you choose to place your focus on.
Yeah. And to tie it back to the challenge that we're doing, this goes back to the fact that currently deep work is a vanishing skill. And one of the reasons we read this book was, with the added time we're taking off our phones, we want to learn about different frameworks. And this is almost a framework for approaching a big part of your life, which is the work that you do. So I don't know, what are your reflections on what of this you're really going to take with you, and what of this we want to maybe implement into our life more, and what of this just didn't feel like it? I know you've already touched on what didn't connect, but what just doesn't really serve the purpose for our mission.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would love to apply this deep work to is, because I already do a good amount of deep work during my school days, but to apply it to this podcast and apply the ritualization and kind of the more ability to focus into this, I think will lead to a lot better, faster work. That will be really nice to see. As far as the overall value of the book, it's similar in the phone challenge, because the phone challenge, the main reason we're doing it is to try to save our attention. And this is like, how do we then strengthen that ability? So it's working a similar aspect, which is why I like that we're doing these at the same time, because the more that we can start to hone this skill, it's just going to make us so much more productive. And it's not just productive, it's going to make life more enjoyable. I've noticed that I'm distracted all of the time throughout my days and just doing anything. Like I can't even go sit and look at a wall without being distracted. I know it's because walls are boring, but like
the wall's not gripping your attention.
This is a bad example, but even just doing other things like having a conversation with someone, I'll find my mind wandering. I'm like, I don't even know what they just said. And this is something that the phone destroys, and then deep work is going to elevate. And so it's kind of the 1-2 punch here of locking in.
Yeah. And I think for anyone who's wondering, what's the value for them, one of the takeaways that I felt from the book. And again, you know, not everything was grounded in some scientific study. This was his approach to how he gets a lot of things done. But valuable things take deep work was a takeaway, which is like, you want to pursue something that's hard and that you'll get a lot out of. It's probably going to take a level of effort and focus. And if you want to do that and do it quickly and do it well, deep work is the approach to the skill to hone to get better at.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is that 1-2 punch. And I'm excited to see, in combination with no phones, where it leaves us.
Yeah. So his second rule for how to do deep work is embrace boredom. And in this, he talks about why it's important and also some things to do that seem boring. For instance, one was memorize a deck of cards, which I have learned how to do.
Huge skill addition.
Add that to things that I've wasted time on. But it's not a waste of time. But boredom is something that we experienced a lot when we did our phone challenge last November. And now this time it's not as much. And I feel like I would like to implement boredom more into our current challenge because of the benefits, which is kind of the brain reset and the ability to process. Because man, when we started this phone challenge, the brain was going all the time. And when I got off the phone, I was like, oh, maybe, you know, my phone just focuses my thoughts, or maybe like, is all this thinking bad or what? I think it's just processing. It's just, I'm just not used to it being there.
Yeah. Well, we're living in a world where it's constant input all the time. You're listening to something when you wake up, you're watching something, you're listening to music when you're walking to your work or driving, there's a podcast, there's a TV show, then you're on your computer doing something, then you take a break with short form content. It's like, when's the out? When's the time where it's like, okay, you sort through it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason for the spike in anxiety. I think that like there's a huge correlation. The spikes in anxiety and depression is like when you can't process, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And boredom is the breath. Boredom is getting that space. And so I think it's a really good rule. And I think for us, we're going to try and incorporate that, especially on the weekends when we have some more time, because we're really busy during the weeks. On those weekends, let's maybe do and like stare at a wall for an hour or just meditate or something where you're just bored and you don't try and solve it.
It's so counterintuitive because that sounds like such a waste of time, but in reality, it'll probably be huge for how we feel.
We'll see.
Yeah. But moving on to rule 3, which is coincidentally quit social media. And he has a lot of valid reasons, so we probably don't need to spend long talking about this because we've talked about most of them.
Yeah, and the one reason he gives that hasn't come up yet that I like is this kind of backwards way that we think about tools modern day. Like the phone should be a tool, and we're evaluate, do I use it? Well, does it provide me any benefit? If yes, then I'll use it. But he says that's not how we used to evaluate tools, and that's not how we should evaluate tools. It's what provides me the most benefit. Social media, you can make a case that, it gives me some social connection. It keeps me updated on what's going on in the world. But the benefit you're getting out of that versus the harm, it does not outweigh the harm. And there's other things you could be doing with that time that would give you more benefit. So that any benefit model is not a good enough evaluation criteria for social media. So reevaluate how you think about your time spent is what he says.
Yeah. So the fourth rule he has is drain the shallows. And he goes into some interesting ideas like go tell your boss to give you less shallow work. But
good luck.
Yeah, right. Good luck. But it's basically about how can you throughout your life either schedule your shallow time, which is the time doing all the little quick distracting tasks, or how can you minimize them? And so one idea that he gives, which I like, is kind of the schedule every minute of your day. And it's not from a be super strict and rigid, but more of a be thoughtful and intentional. So when you get into your day, you kind of know there's no point at which you're like, man, I don't know what to do. You just look at the schedule like, oh, it's this. But if you're like, oh, I should be doing tasks X instead, then you can do it, but not leaving yourself any room to kind of lapse into that distracted state and end up just wasting your time.
Yeah, I mean, he says something that I really like is busyness is not productiveness.
Yeah.
And it's super easy to feel that way. I know one thing that I like to do, and I don't think this is a negative habit, but sometimes I'm not feeling productive, or I'll like clean my room and I'll, instead of like, I have something I really need to get done, but I'll like clean my room and I'll clean the kitchen or something. And it makes me feel good because I'm keeping busy and I'm doing productive tasks, but I'm not getting to the thing I need to be doing. And it's not to say keeping clean isn't good.
Well, he also does talk about productive meditation, which is basically doing these kind of mindless tasks as a way to synthesize information. This did happen to me one time. I was working on this coding project for my compilers class.
There you go.
And I could not figure out how to do this one thing. And I went to Subway and I was mid just crushing this sub. And then like one bite, I was like, oh, I figured it out. And so many people have had experiences like that, but I wasn't even thinking about it.
Yeah. And I'm not disagreeing. My point is just filling up the calendar is not necessarily being the most productive you can be. And so going back to draining the shallows, it's don't let yourself fill up with shallow work so you feel like you're being productive when in reality you're not doing what you have to do.
Yeah. Overall, I think it's a good book to read, and it seems very translatable into the phone usage and the short form content and all of these things that are actively destroying us.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a fairly easy read too.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend it. I think it's one of those things where it is very business oriented, so it's maybe a little less applicable in certain ways. But I don't know. I really enjoyed it, and I think we're going to definitely implement certain parts of it.
Yeah. And so you should definitely go check that out. And then also the Diary of the CEO episode. It's like the brain rot emergency, which coincidentally came out like 2 days after we recorded our episode about the phone.
I know that we're just starting out, but
it feels like we're already getting someone's
on the inside a little.
Yeah, but anyways,
unfortunately we haven't posted that episode.
Right. So, but you guys will know.
Yeah, if you're watching this, then that should be out.
Right. So. If you that what made me want to throw my phone into a trash can.
Yeah.
And so listen to it, please.
No, seriously.
Because they quite frankly have a little bit more research than we do. All right. You know,
sometimes
we can only learn
tip
so
the cat
much.
To the competitor and say,
you know what?
Did a good job this time.
He did have 2 people who spent their lives doing this. Yeah. We did have about 8 hours. So you know, there's a lot more data and science there, but we get the point. So you get the point.
Bad.
Yeah, the phones are bad. You get the idea. Don't use them. But if you really want to be convinced,
they'll convince you.
They'll convince you.
And on that note, I think this being a podcast where we're trying to learn as much as we can during this approach, we're going to be listening to a lot of different resources from different sources of information. So we had the podcast. We read a book for this one. We've read some journal articles for our last episode. That's going to be our goal. It's like we're going to talk about the challenges we're going to do. We're going to breach these important topics, and we're just going to kind of recap what we're learning as well and see what clicked and what didn't. And hopefully it's a useful format. Yeah,
because it should be fun to see, okay, someone might listen to that and be like, oh, that sounds great, but I don't, or like listen to the Diary of the CEO and might sound like, oh yeah, I don't want to have my phone anymore, but I don't really know if like that's really for me. Well, you'll watch us and you'll figure it out because we're going to do it. We're doing what we're doing it. So anyways, looking forward to next week. What have we got on the docket?
Yeah. So episode 4, as we continue this phone challenge, we're going to check back in on all that later to give it some time to develop, maybe that 8-week mark to see how our brains have changed. Mm-hmm. But we want to keep building on the fundamentals, and we're going to be talking about a book that we've read called Tiny Habits, which is really about behavior design and how to start making those changes in your life. And again, we're going to do similar to what we did today, where we're going to break down what we found valuable, how we're applying it into our own lives, and what we might disagree with or struggle with, and loop it back into the fulfillment and meaning discussion that we're trying to ground this whole thing in.
Yeah, it has similar themes to a lot of things we've touched on today, as far as the finding the right amount of energy, the right motivation for the task. So should be fun, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Till next week.
Till next week.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.